Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Berkeley Network's third Alumni Career Advancement event in 2017. Thank you all so much for braving the rain to be with us. We really appreciate it very much. I'm Jordan Henigman. I am the Associate Director of Alumni Chapters and the Berkeley Network here at the Cal Alumni Association, and it is my esteemed privilege to introduce our Executive Director and tonight's moderator, Clotilde Hewlett. We know her as Chloe. Chloe is a double grad from Cal. She received her bachelor's degree in political science as well as her JD from the UC Berkeley School of Law. She has had a whirlwind of a career in government and public policy, so much of a whirlwind that I did not memorize my lines. I'm going to read my notes, so please excuse me. She practiced law for 37 years. She was a registered state and federal lobbyist and has served under 3 different governors of the state of California. She has served the state of California as the interim director of the Department of General Services, as the undersecretary of the State and Consumer Services Agency, and as a police commissioner in San Francisco. She was the director for moral character determinations for the State Bar of California and special prosecutions investigator and assistant district attorney for the San Francisco DA's office. She has been honored as one of the most influential and powerful women of California by the National Diversity Council and has received the Latino Journal's Excellence in Public Service Award, among many other accolades, including my personal favorite, the 2008 League of Women Voters Women Who Could Be President Award. Woohoo! I could go on and on, but our time is limited this evening, and we understand that we're keeping you from the bar. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Chloe Hewlett.
Well, welcome everyone. I am so overjoyed that all of you have come to join us this evening. In particular, I'd like to give a shout out for our board of directors of the Cal Alumni Association that are in the house tonight. We started the Alumni Career Advancement Series with women's career goals and unique challenges in mind. Our hope is to continue developing these series by integrating regional and industry-specific events to enable your professional networks to grow in meaningful ways. And I'm pleased to say, we're also building a virtual networking tool called the Berkeley Career Network that will allow you to connect with Cal women from around the world who share your career aspirations. It will be our own LinkedIn. I cannot stress enough the importance of your input, and I hope that you'll keep in touch with us while these additional services develop. In the first year of our program, we focused on making strides in male-dominated industries, from banking to sports journalism. This July, we hosted a panel at Pinterest headquarters in San Francisco, focusing specifically on women interested in careers in software engineering, and we know that that area needs a lot of work. Tonight, our focus is women in the public sector and the public eye, which poses a specific set of challenges, and this area in particular is near and dear to my heart. Tonight, we aim to create a safe space for women in our Cal community to openly share their stories, the anecdotes about work that we don't necessarily discuss at work, because sometimes some of us can't. Now we are live streaming tonight because we are reaching out to all the women who could not be here. If anyone in the audience has a question that they want to ask us after the live streaming ends, if anyone wants to ask a question in private, I want you all to know that we're going to be here for you. We left as much time for questions and comment sharing as possible, and we urge all of you to participate. We are not holding back anymore. And we'll continue our conversations during the networking reception directly after the panel. So let's begin. I'm honored to be surrounded by so many dynamic women. And you've seen their bios, so we're going to jump right on in. And I would like to ask each one of you to tell us about where each of you are today in your career and where you started. And we're going to start right at this end of the line, our very own controller, Betty Yee, and go right down the line.
Great. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you. It's really a pleasure to be back on campus and to be part of this panel with my co-panelists who I'm just really honored to share the stage with. When I think about my career, it's probably had some pretty non-traditional kind of pathways, but I never thought ever, even in my wildest dreams, that I would end up serving as the CFO for the 6th largest economy in the world, as California's state controller. But my path to this really was honed after 35 years, almost 35 years, doing work in the public finance and tax policy arena. And it was something that I started at a fairly young age because I learned at a fairly young age on a personal level that pretty much in everything that we do in life, in our personal life, in our professional lives, that money drives everything. And that certainly as I looked at being an advocate to my immigrant parents who ran the laundry and dry cleaning business on the west side of San Francisco, raising 6 kids, 5 of whom graduated from Cal, was something that really began my thought about being in public service. And that was being part of a family who grew up in a family business. The best employees for my parents were the kids. And for me, and I love telling the story because this is becoming more and more of the common immigrant experience in California. But translating from my parents and being very good with numbers, handling all the financial transactions for their business, and as I finally like to say, just as I was minding the store for my parents' laundry and dry cleaning business, I now have the great privilege of minding the store for the great state of California. But really, it was where I learned the value of a dollar. We grew up poor, but I never knew a day when we were poor because we were rich in values. But negotiating with vendors for my parents, if I didn't get a good price on a gross of buttons or a dozen zippers, it probably meant that we weren't going to have that carton of milk in the refrigerator that week. So it meant a lot in terms of what money meant in our daily lives. But really what started my trajectory into thinking about a life in public service was being their advocate, being my parents' advocate, and for the Chinese American families who really didn't have anyone standing up for them before the local San Francisco school board when their children were proposed to be bused across the city as part of the school desegregation program. And being a spokesperson to them, opposing the busing program, not because we were opposed to the goals of the program, but because none of the families had a driver in the family, and should anything happen to their children, they'd have to be on public transportation well over 2 hours to get to them across the city. So it was a real hardship. Many of them had businesses of their own that they couldn't shut down during the day. And I remember testifying before the local school board at the age of 13 with exactly this statement, expressing our opposition. Went back to my seat in the auditorium, and the busing program lasted for the next 30 years. And it was going to involve my younger sister as the first class to be bused. Everything went fine with the busing program in our family, but that experience just left an impression in my mind that I stood up for someone, that I was a voice for someone. And really, throughout the rest of my time in school, being involved with student government, and then obviously looking at issues around money with the family business, and really seeing how money did truly drive everything, and that if you could be in a position to really influence the allocation of resources, how really powerful and impactful that could be. And so that was really what guided the work for the rest of my time in public service. And so being here right now is really a lifelong commitment to being sure that all voices are at the table when it comes to concerns about how resources are allocated. And as the controller today, my job is to be sure that the funds are allocated according to law. I'm the only independent auditor for the state of California. And I do believe that really what people are hungry for when they look at government is to be sure that they're being treated fairly and that there is transparency and accountability with respect to what's going on with their tax dollars. So, and really when I think about it, I don't really think about it as a career. It's really more of the sense that it's a service and I have something to contribute to hopefully make an impact and to make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you. We've got some real significant money drivers in the house tonight. So, Erin.
So I'm Erin Bohr. What got me a seat in the table and being in this room was I was the CFO for UC Berkeley for 5 years, which was my dream job, and I was really excited to have that role. What I'm doing now is that for Wells Fargo, I run a group for them that serves higher education across the country. And one of the cool things that Wells did when they recruited me was to say I get to give a certain percentage of my time to service in the industry. So one of the things I do is I'm a commissioner for the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and I donate my time in terms of the body that gives accreditation to colleges from UC Berkeley down to a very small college you've probably never heard of in Southern California that serves a niche market. And so that has been really fulfilling to me. Where I started out, I was a Pell Grant recipient. And so, my mother, the first year I went to school, made about $19,000 a year. And so I really saw the value, and one of the scholarships I got, you got to meet the people who were giving you the money. And so I'd say that was kind of the foundation of the public service. In terms of kind of getting to where the money was, it actually was my ex-husband because he kept saying, you're not making enough money, you're not doing this. And so I said, fine, I'll take a job in public finance. And it's interesting how that changed my course, right? And really got me into very different discussions. And I wish I could say that it was the visionary, that I knew that this would be a good fit for me, but it was really the stubbornness and the reacting to kind of a situation I was in personally, but has served me very well. And so I feel fortunate that other roles I've had, I worked for New York City ONB directly in public service. I worked for the rating agencies in terms of working and rating government, public transportation, power. So I think my unique perspective here is kind of going back and forth on each side and currently having one foot in public service and then one in the private sector that serves public servants.
And our transportation guru.
Good evening. I'm Tilly Chang, and I serve as the Executive Director of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Cal was my 92 grads. It was 25 years ago. And it's such a pleasure to come back in this capacity. I love speaking with young leaders. I love speaking to women. I think that each of us is a leader inherently, and it was here at Cal that my passion for transportation was sparked. I think there was a hint of it earlier, though, as I was riding around my suburban neighborhood in San Jose, and I just thought, wow, the bus and the bike, those were freedom. It was to the bowling alley or to the, the local shopping center. And I just really sort of intuitively felt like, oh, this is a really important aspect of our life. It wasn't until I got into Cal and I started to take courses through my econ major, and I was exploring ways to apply econ to something meaningful to me. And I found the city planning department, and I discovered the notion of transportation, actually also through a economic geography course, urban economics course, I think, in the geography department. And I was really turned on as far as a discipline that allowed me to bring all kinds of interdisciplinary aspects to it, the social side, about how important it is for people to have access to jobs and opportunities, the sort of quantitative side with the engineering, sort of all the different social aspects to it, and the urban form, and how transportation can really drive land value and therefore the shape of cities. I fell in love with cities. I fell in love with the notion that we could really help shape urban environments, and I just realized that I was an urbanist at that point. From there on, I was really lucky to be encouraged through scholarships. There's a wonderful organization in our industry called the Women's Transportation Seminar, it's sort of unique in that that is the organization to be in transportation, whether you're a man or a woman. And they, gave me the nod as an undergrad here. I got a scholarship. I was fortunate to then go on and work in all different public agencies, whether it's this transit agency or that. I had experiences in Santa Clara, at the FTA, at the federal level. And I just realized that this is an amazing field, and I wanted to keep growing. I ended up going on and doing a graduate degree at MIT, and then went on to do a stint at the World Bank. And that's really where it was just sort of just a real opportunity, a real pleasure to kind of go back and spend a lot of time, particularly in Asia, working in China and a whole bunch of other places, and bringing that experience from the US to them, but also learning so much from international colleagues. And after that time, I realized, wow, this is a real choice, and that I'm at a crossroads, sort of as I headed into my 30s. Do I want to have this international lifestyle and experience? Can I do this and have a family and all those things that really come to the fore around that time? And I decided with my fiance, my partner then, that, I've had a great experience doing international work, but my heart is really in California and in the Bay Area. So we came back, and I actually took a few years to detour from transportation and was in the private sector. And that was really valuable. I thought that, this was going to be just a good opportunity to kind of re-enter the domestic scene. And I actually worked in a wireless technology firm, a startup way back in that early boom, the early 2000 boom. That gave me an incredible experience to better understand, how infrastructure and wireless technology impacts people. And so my frame really is in infrastructure and investment in infrastructure, whether it's I'm a passionate advocate for education as human infrastructure, but also physical infrastructure, and how we can take that basic long-term view and turn it into something that that we work on incrementally, but we are always pushing forward. I realized at that point my passion was working at the city level, having worked at international and local, and I said, well, okay, the city that I love is San Francisco. So I was fortunate in 2003 to join the Transportation Authority as a countywide plan manager. The Transportation Authority does funding and planning. But so since that point, we've done all kinds of planning. It's my dream job. I love serving the public in San Francisco and the region, helping to shape infrastructure policy. And happy to talk more about later.
And Sandra, do you feel the full spectrum of public service?
And Chloe, I just want to, first of all, it's such an honor to be up here, and I want to thank you for really setting the frame of we're going to have a real conversation, because I think of my story as being very real. So when I think about my own journey, it's some combination of planning, gut check course corrections, and just life happening. So I was a college dropout, and I did the classic thing that a lot of women do, which I was following a man instead of following what I needed to do for myself. And that deterred me for a number of years. And it's one of those things, I was working at the LA Times in advertising and public relations, but did not have a degree and recognized that there's a ceiling there. And so I said, well, I'm gonna have to go back to school. And so I started going back, taking one class at my local community college. And then I was like, I am never going to finish. So I ended up transferring to San Jose State, where I got my BA, and I just went motoring. I was taking full loads for the fall, for the winter, for the spring, for the summer. And once I got back on track, I really was excited about education. I always had this sort of dream, I might get a PhD. And so I applied to Berkeley and got in the political science department. And I'd say my second year, I was planning to do urban planning. My dad worked for the city of San Jose, so it's really exciting to hear you love San Jose. And I was planning to do something around urban politics, urban economy. And then the Rodney King beating happened, and then the verdict. And so I was out protesting and got arrested and spent the weekend in Santa Rita County Jail. And decided I'm going to write about police accountability. So that's how I ended up doing my dissertation on police accountability, community policing, how communities could have more impact and influence on the policing in their communities. So did that for my dissertation, ended up being recruited to the University of Maryland at College Park, where I was a professor of criminology and political science. And there are certain aspects of being in academia that I liked. There were also other aspects that I thought at that moment in my life they were not really the right fit. And so I got an opportunity, and I also wanted to come back home, in all honesty. I mean, I loved DC, I lived in DC, but I was ready to come home. And so I got an opportunity to join a foundation in the South Bay, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. And through the course of my time there, I held a number of different roles, but the two that were really sort of also set me on some new course directions. I was the program officer to the president of the Board of Trustees. So I got an opportunity to work across the entire portfolio, which included really small grant making with grassroots organization, all the way up to big international organizations and working internationally. And then my last few years there, I became the program officer for our Sub-Saharan Africa portfolio on women's leadership and girls' education. So we ended up, I think, 6 countries that we worked in all together. And that is another sort of transformative moment where I realized what I learned about agency and what I learned about communities and what I learned about the ways that we look at the world as Americans that is so American and to sort of flip that lens was just eye-opening and to think about social change in a whole different way. And so after almost a decade there, I was really ready for the next thing. Spent a little bit of time running a small nonprofit that worked in South Africa. But what I really had trained my eyes on was coming back to do the job I'm doing now. And part of the reason is when I was a professor, so I'm the director of the Public Service Center, I'm the assistant dean of students. When I had been a professor, I had integrated service into my courses. So it was really important that the students got an idea of what actually happened out in the world. And one of the things I recognized, and this really became clear to me when I was working in Africa, is that unless you can connect personal change, personal transformation to social transformation, things don't stick. That is when you really get change that sticks and you can move something forward. Because what's fascinating about personal transformation is that individuals can end up lots of places as we're learning, right? And if you have those kind of leadership skills in that lens, the right person, the right people in the right places can completely shift things. And so I wanted to be engaged in work in building that next generation of leaders who had that lens and were thinking about that. So I have to tell you, every day I come to work and I'm just like, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. This is great.
Thank you. Now, you each have had many years of experience making critical moves to advance your careers. And I know these decisions are not easy to make, particularly for women who are maneuvering in male-dominated spaces within the public sector. In the beginning, it is very important to identify our allies at work that you can confide in. Whether you're at the crossroads or just seeking guidance on the day-to-day, I call this our board of directors. That said, we know the statistics. Women hold just 23.7% of statewide elected executive offices around this entire country. Currently, there is only one woman of color serving as governor. In the public sector, Black and Hispanic women represent a dismal 2.8% of leadership. Very dismal numbers when we all know in this room, positive change always begins with women. So I'd like to ask each one of you, how have you identified advocates at work, created your own board of directors, particularly when personal or political perspectives of the organizations in which you have served differ from your own? And I'll start first with Aaron.
is I would encourage everyone to ask people to be in your kitchen cabinet or your board of directors. I'll never forget when I was moved to New York and I was now heading up a public finance group focusing on higher ed. And I went into one of these industry groups that sort of knew me, and I literally looked at the other women in the room and I said, I've never done this before, I need help. And I was actually shocked that people took me aside and we brainstormed for almost 2 hours. And so what that experience taught me was, one, I was of course nervous walking into a group of my quote unquote peers, although they all had 20 more years of experience than me. They were almost all competitors, but I would say that they took me aside and said, hey, how can we help? It was interesting that when I took the job at UC Berkeley, I literally would call people up and say, hey, you're a Berkeley alum, you're the VP senior muckety-muck of your university, can you help me? Not one person ever said no. And so I would just say that that is a really powerful thing, and getting other people vested in you has served me very well. And I'm very fortunate that early on there were, until I got to that higher level, I didn't have access to those women. So I would say earlier on it was predominantly men, but then as I became more senior, or now, I'm looking to be on more boards, just asking has really opened a lot of doors. As long as after you ask, right, you've got to be succinct on what you need. You've got to have ideas on how concretely they can help. And then, once you've asked for help, it's on you to do the follow-up. I'll say that on the reverse, when people ask me to help and they sit down, they've got no ideas and they're not very engaging, I'm like, come on, it's a two-way partnership. But that would be my perspective.
Mentorship is critical, and I just love giving back because I received so much benefit from my mentors, and it started here at Cal. Betty Deacon, who is amazing. Yes, okay, thank you. So she's, I think, coming back and being honored very soon through ITS. So she was my professor early on in urban planning, and really encouraged me all along throughout my entire career. So I just have a big shout out to Betty, another Betty. And just studying, I think, women leaders like Betty Yee. I mean, I got involved through volunteering on campaigns. I got involved with nonprofit organizations. And so I really sought out organizations and leaders that I really wanted to just learn, what is their style? How do they handle different situations? Oh, that's how she handled it when somebody just completely ignored her comment, but then somebody else made the same comment, and then, then she kind of stood up for herself. So I think by studying different women leaders, you can sort of have informal mentoring by just really just paying attention and then just communicating, as Erin said, with following up and say, I really appreciated how you handled that. And people love to hear that you've actually paid attention very closely to what they've done. And then they're very much more open, I think, to also helping you in whatever way that they can. Don't be shy. Also sign up for different training programs. I think that there's so many programs out there. There's fellowships and grants. It's just let that elbow grease, right? So where luck meets opportunities, just showing up and taking that initiative. There's lots of organizations out there that designed to help you, lots of networks, and just knowing what they are is really important. I was fortunate to be mentored by a good friend's sister who took me under her wing when I first showed up in DC, didn't know anyone. She remains a really great friend of mine today, Emily Morase. She's on the school board in San Francisco, and she's also the executive director of the Commission on the Status of Women in San Francisco. Emily early on said, she basically took me under her wing and said, I'm just gonna just kind of guide you here and there. And I was like, thank you so much. I felt totally lost coming to DC. In San Francisco, when I got here, she was already here. She pointed me to Emerge, which is a Democratic women's training program. And there I just found a whole just plethora of amazing women to work with, to learn from. They teach you things like how to hover. Hovering is a skill. And these are the little things all the way up to the big things that can really help you across your entire, your whole life, not just your career.
Daddy.
I think in terms of building a kitchen cabinet, first place to start is just being honest with yourself about acknowledging what you don't know. And it's, I often find that we put so much pressure on ourselves that we have to be the smartest person in the room. Well, I can tell you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to be the most resourceful person in the room, but certainly not the smartest person in the room. And so, I now feel like I can kind of go up against anyone on any issue and do just fine because I kind of know where my resources are and what I can rely on. But I would say in terms of the advocates, my early kitchen cabinet members, when I first thought about running for office, were all men. Because there weren't a lot of women in elected office. I did succeed a woman on the tax commission board, and she was a great political mentor. But in terms of just being a mentor in terms of my overall development, I really did resort to a lot of people who were familiar with my past work, who knew about my abilities, and also who were just going to be very brutally honest about how I was going to overcome some of the challenges I was going to face in the environment in which I was going to be working. And so not to be afraid, getting out of your comfort zone, and as Erin said, ask, but also don't surround yourself with kind of yes people, but really stretch, because this is what it's going to take to really be the most resourceful in anything that you undertake. So, but the first thing is just being very honest with yourself and assessing with yourself, what is it that you really need help with, and to not be afraid to pursue those resources to help you.
Sandra.
I would just echo all the things that the other panelists have said. And I had a similar experience where, if I look at my group of support, there's been a lot of men. And partly that, I think, is, again, the nature of the work. But partly it's been, I agree that it's asking. And those were the people who were around, and they responded. I've gotten great feedback from men and support and direction. That said, there are moments in my life where I have felt like you're making a big leap. And I'm kind of a friend collector. So every point of my life, I have friends that I've gotten, and I'm like, you're never getting away. And what's fascinating about that is that, at those moments where I felt most vulnerable and maybe even a little fear about some decisions I had to make, those women, and they're all women, have just leaped in, and I literally have felt them catch me. I get a little teary about it, because it's at that moment when you just know that your friends are holding you, and they're like, don't worry, it's gonna be all right. We're here for you. You can make it through this, and here are some ideas. And you get one friend of mine for a month sent me little gratitude emails every morning, because you need gratitude. But all of that is to say, it really is though, you have to be willing to be honest about who you are, ask for what you need. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable to those folks that you feel you can have that level of trust with. And it is kind of amazing. People love to mentor and love to support. So people really do kind of leap into that space.
Sandra, I'm going to start with you with the loaded questions. I can't resist it. There are a few organizations as male-dominated as police departments. They're the true OK Corral. And you conducted your doctoral research exploring police behavior, community organizing, and the dynamics between police and communities of color in Oakland and Seattle. As a woman of color in a position of leadership within environments like law enforcement, what issues did you face navigating that space? And what has that experience taught you about the unique challenges for women of color in the public sector?
Great question. So I would step back a little bit, because I grew up in San Jose. At the time that I was growing up, we were the only black family in our entire neighborhood. So for my whole entire elementary school, it was me and my brothers, which had a whole number of challenges. And what I didn't know at that point is that was a training ground for my life. Because I'd say almost every setting I've been in, I've been kind of one-off, right? So I was went to San Jose, I was a transfer student to San Jose State. I went to San Jose State and came to Berkeley, where most of my classmates had gone to Ivy schools, studied police. Even when I worked in philanthropy in my organization, most of the time I was the only black person there. So in a way, I think what's the good part about that is the gift in that is I'm very comfortable being the only. And it's something I've learned how to navigate. I do think police departments are a little bit unique. I spent many, many hours, I always say this, many, many hours willingly in the back of a police car. And it really varied in terms of how I was treated. But I will say this, one of the things that I've come to recognize and to own is that there's that moment when you're the only where you're like, am I crazy? Like, am I seeing what I'm seeing, or am I crazy? You're not crazy. You are seeing what you are seeing. It probably is some permutation of racism or sexism. It is happening. That said, your point of power is deciding what you're going to do in that moment. And sort of intuitively, I had sort of skills that I developed over the years, but it wasn't until I went to South Africa that somebody gave a language to it. And I was working with some students there who had been grown up in the townships, were training to become teachers. We're often in situations where, it's South Africa, so that history is very much alive. And one of the students said, when I'm at that moment where I realize that someone is treating me differently, I take a moment to find myself. And I find what is true for me in that moment and how I want to show up. And I make a choice. And what was great about that for me is sometimes that choice is, I'm going to address this. Sometimes that choice is other things that you might want to do. But being true and authentic to who you are and finding that moment. And not allowing, the other challenge when you are the only is that people have assumptions about who you are. And particularly, I'll be real, Black women. Black women are strong, they like to argue, And so people will sometimes try to push you into that role, and to be mindful that if you're going to step into a role, that you're doing it for yourself and on your own terms. And so I would say that when in working any of those settings that I've been in, I've tried to stay true to that. There's always those moments where you're like, oh, maybe I could have done that differently. But that's part of your own sort of self-reflection and recognizing how you can navigate those spaces better.
Thank you. Erin, continuing along in this vein, you've served in multiple roles in higher education, including the CFO at UC Berkeley, and you're now the Executive Vice President and National Head of the Education and Nonprofit Banking segment of Wells Fargo. Can you tell us if you see any similarities or differences in the challenges that women face between the public and private sector?
So the one that comes to mind, actually, thanks to Sandra's story, was that unfortunately the women still don't support each other as much as we would like. I was actually on Tuesday meeting with someone who was so condescending, it was another woman, and I just kept thinking to myself, the budget of the organization that you're running, and I was trying to find a common ground with her, is actually smaller than the smallest department at Berkeley, and yet you're talking down to me, not being supportive, not looking for the common ground. And so I think that's the thing I still find very disheartening, right? I'm a positive person. I'm always looking for the good. I love rainbows and unicorns, right? I'm always like, oh, I'm such an optimist. But I was sitting there with this woman, and I was like, what are you getting out of this, right? Time's our most precious commodity. We're wasting 2 hours. And you can't find the common ground. Instead, you want to show how much more power you have than I do, which is fascinating. And that is the thing that in both the public and the private really bothers me. I can point to lots of very good stories. I look at all of the university presidents and chancellors we have in California. It's amazing. And every one of those women would reach their hand. They take that, if you're the first, don't be the last. So they take that to the extreme. But just on those one-on-one daily conversations, I do find that the competition or the one-upmanship really disheartening. And I hope that many in the room don't see that every day. But I will say that even this week, there was one instance which just sort of broke my heart a little bit, because it was such an opportunity instead to kind of go big.
Well, let's take this conversation to current day events and current news. Betty.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we're really going to get in deep. Politics in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. are still male-dominated spaces. As California's state controller, you were the 10th woman to be elected to statewide office. I was there with you. So I know you walked through the valley of hell. Please tell us the challenges you face during your campaign, taking on the big boys. How did you keep hope alive and maintain your determination? Based on your experiences, what recommendations would you give to women that are out there tonight looking for a career as a government official in public service?
Well, I'm happy to take on this question today. First of all, let me just say, 10th woman ever to be elected to statewide constitutional office and statehood. I'm not going to be the last, and this is my personal commitment. And I hope every woman sitting in this audience is thinking about, in some way, serving either in elected or appointed capacity, because there is so much work to do. What I would say in terms of politics, obviously still very much a male-dominated field. And the campaign that I ran for statewide office was something that was a little unorthodox, I guess, if you will. I'm a people person. I actually love campaigning. I love raising money for campaigns. I've worked for other elected officials when they ran for office, and learned a lot about what it takes. But when it's your own campaign, it tends to take on a little bit of a different flavor, and you have to really do it on your terms and how you feel like you can connect with voters in California. So essentially, what I did was I ran a grassroots campaign for a statewide office, which is unheard of. I mean, I really every political consultant was just telling me, no, that's not how you do it. To which I said, but yes, because I have to do this because I'm running against, in the primary, the Speaker of the California State Assembly, who has a lot of money, a lot of power, and has a lot of connections. But I also felt going into this that I was really the most qualified person to become the next controller of California. And just having that confidence in myself is just what kept me going, because I really did believe that among the field of candidates running for this office. And what I was met with was essentially the Speaker shut down all of the fundraising that I could do among what we called the third house from the lobbyists and their clients in Sacramento. I was on my own in terms of raising the money. Part of how you are viewed to be viable as a candidate is how much money you have in your bank account, not what you bring to the table in terms of your experience and your qualifications. And so really my job was to, how do I let the voters of California know that I'm the most qualified candidate to serve as the CFO for California? And I pretty much just put blinders on, because with that belief in myself, we just went around the state. My husband's here, he knows this. We drove 250,000 miles in my Toyota Camry, and we went to every corner of the state. And I have to tell you that it just buoyed me, because as much as it was demoralizing to not be considered serious because I was running against a powerful person, I knew at the end of the day that it wasn't about who got the endorsements, it wasn't about who had the most money, it was about the votes. And the more that we could actually touch communities and touch voters and really get our message out in that way, and to use social media to just really be on the ground as much as we could, that we had a shot at this. And so we just ran a very, very different kind of campaign. And what I would say to all of you is I really want to change kind of the culture of politics to where women have a shot at being able to run for office, and that we're not measured up by how much money we have in our bank account, and that we're measured by our smarts and what we bring to the table and our experience and how we can problem solve, and how the approaches that we take to solving problems really is for societal benefit as a whole, and not just for the moment of the issue of the moment. So all of that requires kind of cultural change in politics, but there is a way to do this. And I think for a lot of women who run or who are thinking about running, they're discouraged because they don't have the adequate support system. I think they're discouraged because they hate raising money. And really, what's raising money but to say how qualified you are? People want to hear from you and to see that you have the confidence in yourself. That's the first hurdle to overcome in terms of raising money. And as I've learned, you don't need to raise the most money, but you have to raise enough money. And so you don't have to be at the top of that. And frankly, I think money kind of pollutes politics personally. So from that perspective, I don't take certain kinds of money, and I like raising money at a very grassroots level, and a lot of it to be viable. So what I would say, really, for anyone who wants to run for office, please don't discount it. There are more ways to be successful at running for office than what the political pundits will tell you. And I have to tell you, it's been the best experience of my life, because what else could you be doing over the course of your career and over your lifetime that would just catapult you into situations that you probably on your own would never choose to be in, right? And so every day was just like a surprise. But it was also, I have to tell you, the most wonderful journey in terms of knowing what a beautiful state we live in. We live in a beautifully diverse state. We live in a state where, frankly, I truly believe that diversity is our greatest strength and not a threat. Because you go from community to community, and the stories that you hear. And it really emanated from my own experience. And what I would tell people in the way that I campaign was just to try to relate to people. What's politics after all? It's about people, it's for people, it's by people, it's about being sure that their voices are at the decision-making table or being represented at the decision-making table. And so when we're able to speak to communities about that, it broke down some barriers. And then when we were able to actually talk to people about what it means to them, that for me to go back to that experience when I was 13 years old, standing up for my parents and the Chinese American families, asking them, think about a time when they stood up for someone. And so these stories were rich that we heard around the state. So what I would say is, yes, the hurdles are tall. Yes, it's male dominated. But I can tell you, particularly with all of the issues around sexual harassment and sexual assault that we're reading about at the Capitol, the culture is changing. The culture is changing, and all of us have to be part of, all of the women within the institution, we have to be part of developing a stronger sisterhood. And I can tell you, sisterhood has been missing severely in the world of politics.
Thank you. Tilly, as Executive Director of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, you're required to collaborate with public agencies and the private sector. You have to bring diverse communities together for a common goal. How have you been successful in this type of environment as a woman among communities that don't necessarily see eye to eye?
Oh, good. All right. Well, let me tell you, San Francisco is such a pleasure. It's a nirvana for planners, because everyone's interested. Everyone's an expert. It's not. You don't just get like 5 people coming to a public meeting. You get like 50 or 500. So it's a challenging, but just a wonderful environment to do this kind of work. It's a real privilege. And I have to say, when I went up for my appointment as executive director, there were 3 women of color in the final group. I was really proud of that. I was so proud to be among that group of talented women. And next time there'll be a trans woman, So it's just going to continue to just, I think, deepen in terms of the inclusiveness and the diversity and the strength that brings to our community to do things like long-range planning, whether it's, the second tube for BART or bringing high-speed rail into Trans Bay, things that are really meaningful as we sprawl out for housing costs, to bring people in through public transportation to just do basic things that we need to have done, and it's getting harder and harder to pay pay our nurses and our firefighters and all the folks that we need for our city to operate. So what I relied upon is just kind of believing in myself, as Betty was saying, know yourself, believe in yourself, strengthen where you feel like you need to be strengthened, and draw upon that network of friends, draw upon that network of contacts that you've developed. But really just believe in yourself. And you're going to make mistakes, and don't be so hard on yourself when that happens. But just commit to keep pushing through and learning from them, and bringing a humble attitude, but also bringing your confidence, because, as I said earlier, luck meets opportunity. It's preparation that helps you. So being prepared in that moment really will help you navigate all those knowns and unknowns as you try to bring people together. And that empathy, having that perspective will bring people, hopefully, to that process in a way that's more open-minded and being willing to hear from your neighbor across the street, who may not believe, we should take that parking space out and put a bike lane in, or but then listening to your neighbor who really relies on that 14 mission going faster than 5 miles an hour because you don't have an hour to take your kid to school across town and then come back and then go to your own job. And so really hearing each other's stories, bringing communication, bringing inclusiveness and empathy to the conversation, but also having your numbers, knowing that, knowing what you're talking about. I think those are things that will come across in your authenticity, in your credibility, and ultimately in your effectiveness.
Thank you. Tilly, I've got a follow-up question for you. I remember as a young woman attorney, I tried to dress as much as possible like my male peers. And I looked at some pictures lately, and at that time is when this really buttoned up collared shirt, this light collared shirt, and then I'd have this little skinny bow tie. In an effort to look as masculine as I could, because I knew, particularly for young women, we were often judged on our appearance. Yeah. Now, as a 63-year-old grandmother, I wear whatever I want.
There you go.
But I'd like to know, Till,
I love it.
In today's world, how do you navigate those spaces as a young woman of color?
My goodness, what a question. I think just be yourself, be comfortable. Some days I show up and I'm in sweats. I'm a working mom. I want to model that I have a life, and then certain days I'm not going to be, dressed to the nines. But when I do want and need to be, I will just, express myself, and I hope in always a professional way. But I think I'll take another angle to your question, which is an excellent one, Chloe. I'm a short Asian woman. I look young. A lot of Asians, we look young for our age. So coming, I'm putting this in a sort of a more like a disadvantage type thing. But you come into a position of leadership and you're shorter and you're younger looking, and I was a fairly young manager and ED, and you just have to accept that off the bat there's a bit of a disadvantage in terms of being taken seriously, in terms of being able to to persuade people, perhaps. And I think just being, patient, being over-prepared, hopefully, as much as you can, and to really convey, your ideas persuasively, and perhaps in, being willing to repeat them a few times. I think that over time has really paid off. I don't really feel that anymore the way I did when I first came into my position. And it does go to how you dress. So sometimes, you're gonna have to conform a little, but I think depending on your community and your environment and how much you're willing and able to kind of back it up, and be yourself, and let that be the overwhelming message that I am being authentic with you. If I happen to have different earrings or a different hairstyle that you might, that becomes less, it's not even relevant, right? It's just a distraction. So what matters is the quality of your ideas, the character, all the things that you guys know. But just believe in that and have confidence in it.
Now, before we open it up for questions and comment sharing, let's discuss the age-old question of balancing work and family life. And this is a question that traditionally affects women's careers more than men. In particular, for women who have roles in government and public service, sometimes you have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How are you able to integrate work and family life, whether you're raising children, trying to have a solid relationship with your partner, or being a caretaker for a loved one? Is Superwoman even possible? On the converse side, how have all of these roles that many of us have, how has that enhanced our career? So I'm going to start with you, Betty, again, and go right down the line. and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay. First of all, I have a very supportive husband who is retired and supports the work that I do, that pretty much I do 24/7. So having that anchor certainly at home and in your personal life definitely is key. But what I would say is, I've seen many of my peers really forego the when they had an opportunity to have children of their own, really forego that opportunity because they wanted to be successful in this field. And many of the women not having regrets later in their lives, but some having regrets. And so it is a sacrifice of time. And I think we have to be honest about that in terms of the time that it does take to serve well and to really honor the positions that you hold. What I find in terms of my own balance is it's all about time. And if I can, just really find that time, that's my time, the Betty time that gets scheduled in the calendar as Betty time, and take the Betty time and encourage my support system in the office to get me out so that I can take my Betty time. That's really helpful. And so it is about just taking care of myself. It's about working out. It's about being home and cooking for the week. It's and more recently being able to visit my mother in the hospital. So it's things like that. And you do have to take care of yourself. And that's not being selfish. That's not being selfish. It actually enhances your ability to be more effective in terms of the work that you do. So, and one thing I will say, now being in a position to actually hire my executive team, the majority of my executive team are women. And we are very, very progressive in terms of telecommuting and flex time. And it is something that I think, and I will say, productivity is not even an issue. It's not even an issue. And so I hope that when women are in positions to actually make hiring decisions, that they don't think that they're really going to be at a disadvantage by hiring women who are trying to raise families, because it does work and it can work.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'll say that after getting divorced, I was single for a very long time, and then now I have a partner, and I'm fortunate enough to be a stepmom to 2 boys. And so my partner Thompson has been the lead parent his whole life. So that, I would say, is a huge benefit and was a good learning lesson to me as someone who kind of jumped in midstream to someone in elementary school and another in junior high school. The other thing that I would say has been really helpful, having dated a lot of people, that Thompson's flexibility has been fantastic because he travels with me for work. And at first, as a fiercely independent person, I was like, wait, we're moving into the same house and you're traveling with me for work? Like I was sweating. I was like, oh my God. And he calmly pointed out, he's like, there might be a reason that you were single, right? Like, he's like, you gotta kind of. And so for me, in terms of the questions of like knowing yourself and picking a partner who could be that honest with me, right? Like not sulking, like, what are you doing? But like, hey, I really want to go to Pittsburgh. I'm like, really? Or like, he loves Albany, New York. And so if you'd ever told me that I would have this wonderful full life where I have a traveling partner to Albany, New York, I never would have guessed it. But it's been pretty amazing. But, I think that for me, having someone whose time commitments were as crazy as mine, you wouldn't have a fulfilling personal life. So I feel very fortunate. And, just on the other balance, it's like one of the days this week, people were like, I can't believe you took the overnight flight. And I was like, well, what did I get to do? I got to have lunch with my 9-year-old stepson, which was amazing, right? I mean, the middle of the day lunch, I'm like, I don't even take lunch not at my desk. This is great. But you had this magical moment, and then you go to something at this, my stepson's school, and then, you take the overnight flight. But the day was pretty awesome, and I sleep okay on planes, and I wouldn't have traded it. But like, those are the choices you have to make for yourself, right? Because I talked to someone else. She's like, well, I never would have made that trade-off. But you figure that out, and then your life feels pretty amazing. So I feel very fortunate, but I'll say it took me a while to get there. So be kind to yourself, right? Because it's like so easy to beat yourself up that you haven't put all the puzzle pieces together. But like most days you're doing the best you can, right? And then you adjust, so.
Okay.
A lot of that resonated, both Betty and Erin's stories resonated with me. I think for me, I think going in and knowing that leadership would entail sacrifice is important. I wanted to really be intentional and thoughtful about taking even on the role. And at the time, my kids were quite little. I mean, they were 4 and 7, and it was not when I expected to have this opportunity. So you don't get to decide, when these opportunities come. And I was so lucky that others were encouraging me and said they would really support me. But in the end, it came down to me and my husband, and I was so lucky. And my mom at the time was sick, and she had misgivings. She said, I want you to have this opportunity, but I'm worried about the kids. And that's her. And it was an honest issue, and I was worried about the kids. And luckily, I mean, you guys choose wisely. Whoever it is that you have in your corner, your friends, your partner, just choose wisely, because that is really what saw me through and allowed me to take this job at the time that we had, the 2 kids, my mom being sick. And I just ultimately I got her blessing, which was really important to me, and I'm so grateful I did before she passed, because of my husband, who made a commitment to my mom that someone, and most likely it was him, and it has been him, will be home to do homework at 7 o'clock every night. I am not home right now. And Jeff is, so thank you, honey. But we both believe in what each other does, and so we do operate as a team, and I'm so fortunate. The other secret to my ability to manage this lifestyle and work-life balance is my secret weapon, who is my Chinese driving nanny, who is like a unicorn. And I'm lucky enough that we have a babysitter who has been with us since my second one was born, and it's been a wonderful relationship. She's part of our family now. But we don't go on fancy vacations. We go camping. And the kids are fine. They'd rather, there's no difference, going to Europe, going camping. They would rather go camping. So, and I think the time will come, when the priorities may shift, but right now, whatever that formula is, it does take time and thought, and we're lucky to be older parents, so we have a bit more resources. So that's something that worked out for us. The other thing that Betty mentioned is flexibility. So our workplace policy is flexibility. To be a workplace of excellence these days, we don't have the fancy cafeteria or the fancy, this or that. We have some flexibility that our managers are empowered to authorize, and that is essential. And in fact, I have asked my managers to please take your time off yourself, and we're tracking that, because there's so much commitment, people are working too much, and they're not taking their vacations. And I think that's another part of the risk that we face sometimes, is that we are so committed, we want to show and prove that we can do it, and then we don't take care of ourselves.
Okay. And Sandra, I see the wrap-up sign. We're getting there. We're getting there.
I'm married and I don't have kids. But I am that crazy auntie that picks up the kids, gives them sugar, runs them around, and then sends them home. No, but I'm really glad you raised this question, because I think there is such a stigma about being single. And it comes up in a lot of different ways. And I've actually if I had to say the meanest things that people have said to me, it's about being single. And I'm also glad that Betty sort of raised the question of, what is that? I can't say that was a conscious choice. Maybe it was on some levels. I'd never had very strong maternal instincts. And there's moments when you think, I should have, and there's other moments where that works for me. And I would have to say that probably in the last 5 years, my level of comfort in that has just gotten really good in terms of just stepping into that and owning that and being okay with that's your life and your experience.
Thank you. I'd like to just take a few questions, but believe me, we got our reception afterwards, so the dialogue is going to go on. So are there any questions from the audience? And we will have staff walking around with a mic. So I think if we see a hand right up there in the back. And please tell us your name.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. My name is Christy Sham. I'm a current junior studying political science and economics. And my question is, what is one actionable item that you think all of us here in the room today should walk away and kind of think about what we can do in our immediate futures to help empower ourselves and the people around us?
And let's just, which one wants to answer that question? Actionable item.
So I'll say this. So you go out there tonight, right? You meet 5 people in this room, you linked in with them, and you try to find some connection, right? So I would say that that's an actual item when you're here, is to hold yourself accountable to actually having some sort of connection with 5 people in this room, including one person on the panel.
Thank you.
What she said.
Add to that is I think what I think the secret to networking is to actually care about the people that you're meeting. You know, you can tell people who are working a room, and you can tell people who are like, I'm interested in who you are and what you do. And that little bit of difference makes all the difference.
So one of the things when I made the decision I was going to run for public office, can you hear me? Was, you know, we talk a lot about being honest with ourselves, and I don't know that, particularly as women, we really take the time to do that. And so I'm going to encourage you to do something, and maybe not be now, but at a time when you feel ready to do so. And that is to think about just writing a 2-page biography about yourself. I know that sounds really strange, but it's not your CV or your resume, but who's the essence of you? This was something that one of my kitchen cabinet members had assigned to me. It took me about 2.5 months to do. It was like the hardest thing I've ever done. But once I did it, it really became, you know, kind of it just became a part of me, because I got to know myself so well about what shaped my values and the things that I grew up with that influence, you know, my path and my journey, and to now where I can give voice to it at almost any given situation. But it's just kind of this way of just getting down deep with yourself and to be honest about who you are and what matters to you. And when you can speak from that point in any given setting, I think it's just really a powerful thing.
More questions? Let's see. Oh, wow, we got a lot of hands up.
Good evening. I'm Dara Okeke. I just want to say thank you all. This has been such a great panel, and I just really appreciate your authenticity tonight. I am a practicing attorney. I've been practicing for about 10 years, and I know when I first started practicing law, and growing up, I was very shy, hated public speaking, considered myself, and still do, an introvert. And so I realized early on in my career that those were some things that I had to figure out and somehow overcome to be a successful lawyer. And so I'm just interested to hear from each of you, or whoever feels like sharing, what are things about your manner or your personality or just kind of your way that maybe when you started your career, you realized, okay, I'm going to have to hone this or develop this or somehow transform myself to be successful in this field?
Sorry. I'm also an introvert. And I actually like the thought of being an introvert because it says to me, you know, where I find kind of like my, I guess, my energy base is kind of from within. And so, and that does give me, you know, really a lot of strength. But what I would say is that, you know, in the business that I'm in, there's a lot of talk, right? And so I'm not a chatty person. I'm not a talkative person particularly. I like contributing when I have something to contribute. And so for many, many years when I was the only woman in the room, it was quite intimidating because I felt like I did have something to offer, but just not in that setting. And so what I had to learn to do was just to figure out how I can make my contributions known. And a lot of that had to do with just really understanding, you know, what the outcome of whatever meeting I was going to be, and then really trying to think ahead with respect to how I can, you know, really contribute effectively to it and to really show that I could bring value. And to me, that was kind of the way that I could figure out doing it in an authentic way as far as, you know, what I had to contribute. I can tell you, the men in the room, they thought it was actually quite trivial. But I just kept doing it until I decided that I was going to bring other like-minded people to the meetings with me, and that we were actually going to solve a problem, and that it wasn't just about sitting in a room and talking, but that we were really about taking action and really understanding that we were there to really resolve some issues. So it was really kind of the time that I saw that and again it goes back to confidence, that you're in a room and I should say this because I hope all of you feel like what you're already strengthened with is your own personal journey. I hope you feel that way, because that already is kind of your power base. And I don't use the word power very frequently, but when it comes from within, that's truly something that I want to have each of you acknowledge. And so there should be kind of a sense of confidence about that. What you have experienced in your own personal journey is yours and yours alone, and no one can take that away from you. So how do you then apply that in terms of the different settings that you're put in, or that you choose to be a part of? And you'll find ways to be creative about then how to really make a contribution. And to me, I mean, public service, that's kind of what it's about. It's about how do we make contributions so that we can actually affect positive change.
Go ahead, please. I just love that you're talking about that power within, because it really does come from that sense of authenticity. So I'm the opposite. I'm a big E extrovert. But I think the challenge with that, particularly as a woman and particularly as a younger woman, is that you're perceived as a lightweight. And people like to explain things to you. And so, and I really had to make conscious choices. There are times when, in all frankness, you have to roll it back and you have to be thoughtful and think about the language that you want to use in certain settings, which does matter. But at the same time, you have to find a way for that to be authentic and true to yourself. Because people know when you're playing a role, and that is not a position of influence or respect, in all frankness. They kind of know you're kind of playing a role. So that, I completely agree with what Betty said, is you have to find what's true for you and draw on that power and make that a strength.
Thank you. And we have time just for 2 more questions, and then I'm going to really have to wrap it up. So, where's the mics?
Hi, my name is Joanna Quintana. I'm an alumni from Berkeley and a student at USF in public health. One of the things that you mentioned, Erin, was the need for, a few of you have mentioned it or alluded to it, was the need for a sisterhood to support women getting into or interested in occupying positions of influence in the public sector. So I was wondering, what are ways that we can start growing that or cultivating it, or tapping into what it does exist out there to support women who want to start working in these areas.
So Erin, why don't you take that on?
Yeah, so I'll say that I would start with one, reaching out, as I was saying before, to women who are in power. But one of the things which ties to the earlier question that I've personally started spending a lot of time. So I played water polo in college, which means I can swim and beat the crap out of someone at the same time. So my approach as a young professional was to wear 3-inch heels, be the biggest person in the room, make my force known, be over-prepared, and be this big presence. And one of the things that I then shifted to was, how do you make other people at ease, right? And how do you become that network of people that are supporting the other person? And what I would say is, when you do that, and for me that was hard, right? Because I was like, I'm out there, I'm in front, and so to really play that role where instead it was like, okay, I'm gonna let someone else shine, and it's not someone who works for me, it's just some other person in the room. But as you start doing that, I think you become more reflective also on what you need and how that works. And so, I hold a lot of space for that now, and for me it was a big change, but it does, I think, feel like it grows the sisterhood, because when people know you're consciously investing in them, even just in a conversation or listening well, it totally changes the feeling in the room, which then kind of creates that nice space for people to really flourish. And I feel like in many places, if we did that in everything we did, like, how much better would society be, right? So.
Thank you. One more question. Don't worry, we get to network after this.
Hello, my name is Nicole Greeley. I graduated a long time ago, but nonetheless, my question was for those who have children. I was wondering if you ever felt pulled between showing that you have the capacity to be sympathetic, empathetic, and soft with your children, as well as being professional, because I assume that once people understand the type of education you have and training and so forth, they have assumptions about you. So if they see you in one end versus another, I wonder if there's any kind of internal or external conflicts for those who are parents.
So I'll say to the single question that I had for years men who would take me on dates and offer me $10 million to start a company, but thought I could never be maternal. So I'll say the flip side was definitely a challenge for me for years, because they said, you're so focused on your career, how could you ever be a loving mother? And so it's been interesting being a stepmom, because I feel like I've got a very good relationship with my stepkids, but like that was a bias that people put on me that was not intentional. So the flip side was true in my case.
In my case, thank God for my husband. He's like the more natural or lead parent in many ways. It's just more intuitive. Parenting is hard. Our jobs are hard, but I feel like work is just, I have a much better sense of things, and at home I'm constantly just feeling challenged and sometimes lost, and I don't mind showing that vulnerability. I just think that that's just how my reality is, and that's something that I'm continuing to try to grow and to learn. And for work, it just seems natural. It's just my lifelong passion. It doesn't even feel like work. I have to be honest. Parenting is something that is hard, and I feel like that's something that you want to, invest in to become a better parent, and that does take time. So it's me time. It's time to be a better parent, to be a good leader at work, a good friend to friends, and all of these things just are, part of the challenge of balancing things and trying to figure out what's right for you.
Thank you. Well, I hate to wrap things up, but we really are out of time. And like Sandra, I'm a big E extrovert, so I could just sit here until the wee hours of the morning having this conversation. But I hope that you'll join us, exchange business cards with one another during our networking reception after. And for the young alums out there, don't be afraid to ask more experienced alumni in this room to coffee at a later date. I know I have always said yes. And we hope to see you at another alumni career advancement event soon. And if you're feeling really energized tonight, we're looking for volunteers and champions to help us coordinate regional events just like this throughout the state. There are surveys on the reception table and in the lobby where you can leave your information. We'll send you a thank you email to each of you with more information about current and developing programs. And come find us during the reception if you have any questions or you want to get involved. And let's give a round of applause for our incredibly dynamic panel.